Hi everybody. Today I'm working on a 2006 Mini Cooper S. This car has a leaking oil filter housing gasket. I'm not sure why, but I've been seeing a lot of oil filter housing leaks these days. Maybe it's the age of the car. There's been a rash of them in the last few months here. The oil filter housing lives basically in between the axle and the exhaust manifold, and we can see a little bit of seepage along the back here. I think from this angle you can get a better view. You can see that one of the bolts holding the housing is wet, and that's because it's leaking from the housing gasket. The housing itself is held on by three 13mm bolts. We won't completely remove the housing, we're just going to pull it back just far enough to slip the gasket in place behind it. And from the top we can just see the oil filter cap, and the housing is attached directly underneath the oil filter. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove this heat shield, and that'll give us probably enough access to get in there and remove the 3 bolts that we need to. This top heat shield is held in by just a couple of 13mm bolts. We'll remove these with a ratchet. We don't need to take the heat shield out of the car, we'll just kind of push it out of the way like this. Push it backwards. Now we can see that there's one more heat shield that we have to remove on the bottom side of the exhaust manifold, this one right here. And this is just held in by this one 10mm bolt right here. But this heat shield is on top of the starter motor, and it's probably going to arc current, so we need to disconnect the battery before touching this one. So we'll come back here into the boot and just loosen up and remove this negative battery terminal. And remember, don't close the boot lid after you remove the terminal. You won't be able to get it open again unless you use the emergency override cable, which is located under the rear passenger seat. If you accidentally close the boot, the emergency release is located under the back seat here. You just pull up, and then it's right here, and you just pull on this one. And then just use your hand and hit hard to put the seat back in place. The easiest way to get to that 10mm bolt is with a long ratchet extension. So we'll come down through here like this. Now that we've gotten the bolt out, we can pull this housing off. It's just held on by a couple of rubber grommets on the left side of the car here. So we're just going to wiggle and pull, and it should come right off. There we go. I've just got it out of the way here, pushed back out of the way, and we may need to do maneuvering from time to time to allow us to get to all 3 of the bolts. On the left side here, there's a clamp that holds the O2 sensor wire in place. I'm just going to push the wire out of the clamp to make it easier to move around. I'm going to shove the camera down there, and I don't know if you guys can see, but there's 3 bolts holding the housing in place. They're kind of in the shape of a triangle. One of these bolts is off to the left and covered in oil. Another of the bolts is going sort of through the housing, and then the last one's off in the corner. Unfortunately, I can't really show and do at the same time, or see and do at the same time, but I'm going to kind of go by feel. I'll use a 13mm ratchet with a short extension, and we'll try to loosen up all 3 of these bolts. Oh, and I'll put some towels on the garage floor as well, because when I pull the housing off, it's probably going to leak. Alright, I can feel one of the bolts, so I'll just start loosening that one. Okay, so I got one of the bolts out. You can see there's oil on the threads, which means it's just starting to leak in this part of the gasket as well. Okay, there's another bolt up on the top here. Looks like it's just underneath the location of that 10mm heat shield bolt. They're not in there very tight. They're pretty easy to back out. The only problem is you can't see what you're doing, so you have to go a little blind. Okay, that's the second bolt. Okay, let's go see if we can find the location of that third bolt. Okay, the third bolt is, I was just feeling around, the third bolt is at the very bottom underneath the oil pressure switch, that green switch there. Okay, I'm under the car here. It looks like the straightest shot to this last bolt is going to be from underneath the car. You can see I'm reaching around behind the subframe with a long socket extension, and it looks like I have a straight shot onto the bolt, so I'm going to try that. So I'm going to use a couple of socket extensions. One's about, I don't know what this is, 6 inches, and the other's about 8 inches long. And we'll put this on with a regular 13mm socket. I'm going to reach up through the back here. Okay, I've got the socket onto the bolt now. And the other end of the socket sticks out back here by the exhaust with just enough room to put my wrench on. Okay, it's just now turning. It only needs a little bit of a turn to loosen up, and I don't think it's going to be possible to get to this bolt from the top because the exhaust manifold is completely in the way. And we'll finish backing that bolt off. Alright, it's out completely. Pretty wet. Alright, then we just pull back the housing, and this is a automatic transmission Cooper S, so there's no intercooler for the water to oil. So it actually moves around pretty easily. If you have a Cooper S manual, expect to have some resistance here because there's going to be a couple of heater hoses going to the, there's going to be a cooler exchange attached to the side of this, and it's going to resist movement. This one flops around pretty easy. But on a Cooper S, it's probably just going to kind of float right about here from the resistance of the hoses. In any case, you just kind of want to pull it back as far as you can and reach in, and the old gasket is typically going to be stuck onto the side of the block housing right here. So just kind of pull that off and then clean it up real good with a towel. Well, it doesn't have to be that good, it's just oil. Just want to wipe off the surfaces. Then go grab your new gasket. Take a couple seconds to study it and figure out which direction it needs to go into these grooves here. You won't get it on the first time, guaranteed. Eventually you'll get it figured out. Then you just kind of want to squish the gasket into the groove here. Grab one of the bolts and do your best to hold it up and thread it back into place without being able to see what you're doing. Just get them started by hand at first. Fortunately, these bolts go in nice and smooth the whole way in, so you can tighten them just by finger tight and then finish off with your socket wrench. And be sure to start threading all 3 bolts before you tighten any of them with your wrench. Alright, we'll try putting in this last bolt using a really long socket. And hopefully we don't drop it too many times. Here it comes, I can see it going towards the hole. And there we go. Alright, now we can start tightening them back up again. Now we'll go back up top and tighten these last 2. And then last we'll put the heat shield back in place. And you may have to go up below and on top of the car to see where these little bushings go. There's one is right here where my finger is, and the other one is on the bottom side of the starter motor. And if you have trouble, you might find that if you put just a little bit of oil on the rubber, it'll help them to slide better. There we go. Once you got it lined up, this 10mm bolt hole will be visible again. Now we'll go ahead and try to put this bolt back in. Now we can put the upper heat shield back in place. And that's pretty much all there is to it. After this, we'll reconnect the battery, start the car up, and check for leaks. So that's how to replace the oil filter housing gasket. on a 2002 to 2006 Cooper S. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and bye-bye.